All right, let's get into it, because this is one of those updates where you almost have to take a deep breath before reacting. What Kyle Shanahan shared completely reshapes how you look at where this 49ers team is right now. This isn't just another routine injury report. This is a wave, and it's hitting at the most uncomfortable possible moment, when the margin for error is basically gone. When you zoom out and really look at everything together, it becomes clear just how much pressure this roster is under heading into this next stretch. You're talking about key players on both sides of the ball, starters, depth pieces, leaders, all dealing with something at the same time. And for a team that's already had to navigate adversity all season, this feels like a tipping point where coaching, depth, and resilience are all going to be tested at once. As a fan, it's the kind of moment where you start asking yourself not just who's hurt, but what this team still has left to lean on. What makes this update feel even heavier is that it's not isolated to one position group. The issues are stacked. You've got linebacker problems, offensive availability concerns, questions about timing, and then a couple of storylines that could swing things in either direction depending on how they break. Some of this news is flat-out brutal. Some of it leaves the door cracked open just enough to keep hope alive. And some of it forces uncomfortable conversations that fans have been pushing off. As we go through this, I want you to think about one thing and be honest with yourself. Does this feel like the toughest stretch of adversity the 49ers have faced all season? Drop a comment with a yes or a no, because I'm really curious where you land on that. And if you're the type of fan who wants clear, straight-to-the-point updates without the overreaction, make sure you're subscribed and have notifications turned on. We're pushing toward 1,000 subscribers, and every single one genuinely helps this channel grow. The key with an update like this is understanding context. Injuries don't exist in a vacuum. One guy going down changes roles, responsibilities, and game plans for multiple players. It affects how aggressive the coaching staff can be, how much they trust certain packages, and even how opponents prepare. That's why today isn't just about listing names. It's about understanding the domino effect that's starting to take shape. There's also a mental side to this that doesn't get talked about enough. When players see teammates dropping, especially in the same room, it changes the emotional temperature of a locker room. Sometimes teams rally. Sometimes cracks start to show. Which direction this goes is one of the biggest questions hanging over this group right now. So as we move forward, we're going to break this down piece by piece, starting with the most alarming development of all, the situation at linebacker. Because once you really see how thin things have gotten, it puts everything else into perspective and sets the stage for why the next few decisions matter so much. Reply with C when you're ready to move on. Now we can zero in on what is easily the most concerning part of this entire update, because this is where things go from uncomfortable to borderline alarming. Losing Tatum Bethune for the remainder of the season is not just bad news, it's worst-case scenario news, especially when you look at the state of the linebacker room as a whole. This is a position group that was already stretched thin, and now it's operating in survival mode. Bethune didn't have a perfect game last time out, and nobody's pretending otherwise, but that almost misses the point. He was available. He was taking snaps. And right now, availability is everything. When Kyle Shanahan confirms that Bethune is done for the year with a groin injury, it immediately forces the 49ers into contingency plans they were hoping not to touch yet. There's no easing into this. There's no ramp-up period. This is an abrupt shift. That's how you end up with Eric Kendricks stepping into a starting role after being signed just weeks ago. And to be clear, Kendricks brings experience and professionalism, but this isn't the original plan. This is adaptation on the fly. It's asking someone to parachute into a defense that relies heavily on communication, timing, and trust. and to do it under playoff-level pressure. That's a tall order for anyone. And the problem doesn't stop there. D. Winters dealing with an ankle and Luke Gifford dealing with a quad means the depth behind Kendricks is also shaky. When you start talking about evaluating guys throughout the week and monitoring availability, that's coach speak for uncertainty. The real tell here won't be the injury report. It'll be the transactions, tryouts, practice squad signings, emergency depth. Those moves will tell you exactly how concerned the team really is. This is where I want your input, because this isn't just a football question, it's a philosophy question. Do you think the 49ers should aggressively bring in a veteran linebacker from the outside, yes or no? Drop that in the comments, because there's a real debate to be had there between continuity and pure necessity. What makes this so dangerous is how central linebacker play is to everything the 49ers want to do defensively. It affects run fits. It affects coverage. It affects how much pressure you can send. When that position group is compromised, it puts stress on every level of the defense, including guys who are already being asked to do a lot. If this breakdown is helping you make sense of what's really going on, make sure you like the video and subscribe. We're closing in on 1,000 subscribers, and this is exactly the kind of moment where staying informed actually matters. And here's the thing. As bad as this sounds, this storyline doesn't exist on its own. It directly ties into the next update, because there's one player whose potential return could change the entire outlook of this linebacker crisis. That's where the conversation shifts next. Reply with C when you're ready to continue. This is where the conversation finally pivots from pure damage control to cautious optimism. Because when you talk about the linebacker situation, you can't do it without talking about Fred Warner. His name changes everything, and the way Kyle Shanahan talked about his injury is just as important as the injury itself. Normally, this team avoids timelines like the plague. When something is significant, you usually hear vague language, and very little else. That's why this update stood out. The fact that there's even a discussion about a potential return window matters. Hearing that Warner has been telling people inside the building that he's hopeful about coming back, and then hearing Shanahan acknowledge the possibility of him returning later in the postseason, tells you this isn't wishful thinking. It's not a guarantee, but it's real enough to keep on the radar. The difference between the divisional round and the NFC Championship might not sound huge on paper, but in reality, it's everything. You have to be honest about expectations. Banking on Warner for the divisional round feels aggressive. It's probably not something you should count on. But when a head coach even floats a possible window, especially one who's usually hesitant to do that, it's usually a sign that progress is real. And with everything happening at linebacker right now, the importance of his return can't be overstated. So let me ask you this directly. Would you risk bringing Fred Warner back early if you knew it could stabilize the defense? Yes or no? That's not an easy question, and there's no perfect answer. On one hand, he's the heartbeat of the defense. On the other, rushing him back could create long-term consequences. Drop your answer, because this is one of those fan debates that actually matters. If Warner does make it back, even later, it changes how you view the rest of this roster. Suddenly, Kendricks isn't carrying the full load. Suddenly, the margin for error widens just a bit. And suddenly, what feels like a crisis starts to look more manageable. That's why this update has been such a roller coaster emotionally. And if you want to make sure you don't miss any updates on Warner's status as this unfolds, make sure you're subscribed and notifications are on. We're pushing toward 1,000 subscribers, and playoff injury updates are exactly where staying locked in makes a difference. But while the defense is dealing with uncertainty, the offense isn't exactly operating from a place of comfort either. There are availability questions there that are starting to raise real concerns, and they could have a direct impact on how this team functions moving forward. That's where we're headed next. Reply with C when you're ready to continue. Now we have to flip over to the offensive side of the ball, because this is where frustration really starts to creep in for a lot of fans. The situation with Ricky Pearsall is tough to talk about, not because of talent, but because of availability. From everything we've seen when he's been on the field, there's no question he can play. He can contribute. He fits what this offense wants to do. The problem is that he just hasn't been able to stay out there consistently, and re-aggravating a PCL injury is not something you brush off lightly. When Kyle Shanahan says Pearsall and Trent Williams will be evaluated throughout the week, that's technically neutral language, but the context matters. Hearing that Pearsall may have re-aggravated his knee is not a positive sign. And this is where the conversation gets uncomfortable, because you can acknowledge how unlucky his journey has been while also admitting that the offense is being affected. The old saying exists for a reason. The best ability is availability, and right now that's the biggest question mark hanging over him. So I want to know where you stand on this. Is availability becoming a real concern with Pearsall long-term, yes or no? Drop that in the comments because it's a fair discussion, especially with how much this offense depends on timing and trust. Trent Williams is a different kind of concern entirely. His absence changes the entire structure of the offense. It's not just about losing an elite player. It's about how much it limits what you can call, how much pressure it puts on the quarterback, and how defenses attack you when they know that side isn't the same. If he's able to return, it stabilizes everything. If not, adjustments have to be immediate and precise. This is where the conversation gets interesting, because while there are concerns, there's also a potential spark that hasn't been talked about enough. Jacob Cowing, the 49ers opening his practice window is a big deal. Speed has been missing, not effort, not toughness, speed. And Cowing brings something that the current wide receiver group simply doesn't. He stretches the field horizontally and vertically. He forces defenses to account for him. If you're excited to finally see what Jacob Cowing can bring, let me know in the comments. I've been looking forward to this for a while, and it feels like the timing couldn't be more important. Reports from the off-season were glowing. He flashed. He stood out. And now, when the offense needs a jolt, he might finally get his chance. If this breakdown is helping you see the full offensive picture, make sure you like the video and subscribe. We're closing in on 1,000 subscribers, and every bit of support helps keep these deep dives coming. And as frustrating as some of these offensive updates are, there is one piece of clear, genuinely good news that helps hold everything together. That's where we wrap this up next. Reply with C when you're ready to finish. This is where we finally get to take a breath, because in the middle of all this uncertainty, there is one update that actually brings some stability. Brock Purdy is good to go. After taking that hit and dealing with a stinger, there were understandable concerns about lingering effects, especially given how important he is to everything the offense does. The fact that there are no lingering issues, no setbacks, and no limitations is massive. In a moment where so many things feel fragile, having your quarterback healthy matters more than almost anything else. When you step back and look at this roster, Purdy's health is the anchor. It's what allows the coaching staff to still trust the game plan, even when pieces around him are shifting. Without him, all of these injuries would feel exponentially worse. So, I'll ask you this straight up. How important is Purdy's health compared to everything else going on right now? Is it the number one factor for you, or are there other concerns that weigh just as heavily? Drop your thoughts in the comments, There are also a couple of smaller injury notes worth keeping an eye on. Jerry Brown and Kalia Davis are both considered day-to-day after leaving the last game. That doesn't sound alarming on the surface, but at this point, even minor issues matter. Depth is being tested everywhere, and the fewer surprises, the better. Before we wrap this up, there's one more storyline that might not impact this week's game directly, but it could shape the future in a sneaky way. Multiple key 49ers front office executives are interviewing for the Dolphins' general manager position. These are homegrown personnel people who know the building, know the culture, and know how this organization operates. With Mike McDaniel staying in Miami, it makes sense that he'd look to people he trusts. This doesn't mean changes are guaranteed, but it's something to watch. Continuity matters, especially when you've built a roster and culture the way the 49ers have. Losing key decision-makers can have ripple effects down the line, even if everything feels stable right now. As we close this out, let me know what worries you most after hearing all of this. Is it the linebacker situation, offensive availability, or something else entirely? And if you've made it this far, make sure you like the video and subscribe. We're pushing toward 1,000 subscribers, and this channel grows because of fans like you who care about the details.